here's what it says about her. This is near the end of part 6 of the second book. These are all Gladys, and I'm just going to skip around the page for a second. She believed that all things which might make the world beautiful, love and kindness, leisure and art, were shut up in prison, and that successful men like Bayless Wheeler held the keys. Even her own little life was squeezed into an unnatural shape by the domination of people like Bayless. She wanted him, that is Claude, to be more successful than Bayless and still be Claude. She would have made any sacrifice to help him out. Any sacrifice to help him out. If a strong boy like Claude, so well endowed and so fearless, must fail simply because he had that finer strain in his nature, then life was not worth the chagrin it held for a passionate heart like hers. She too is taken with the idea of martyrdom and would sacrifice anything for Claude to be successful and still Claude. That's what martyrs do, right? They sacrifice everything. So far, this seems like a very promising engagement. Two souls that are very much like each other. And we also see that when Claude marries Enid, what does she do? Search for another man? No. She swears off men forever. She loves the old. She looks at the old homes in town and says, what a marvelous little place. Just like Claude. She is extravagant. She longs. She is desirous. All of this suggests that they could have been happy together. Could romantic love, the meeting of two souls, fill the hole in his soul? This is, as I say, the tantalizing, delicious possibility that Cather holds out for us. But we don't find out, which is, of course, telling in itself. Cather seems to think, or she seems to be saying, that it would not have worked out. There is no example of a happy marriage in her books. There is no example of romantic love filling the hole in someone's soul in her books. And in fact, one of the fine books that she writes called Lucy Gayheart, seems like a happy lady, falls in love, going to meet her lover, falls through the ice, dies. It's fantastic. The closing scene of the novel is looking down from above at her face under the ice. She was pretty even in death. Here's what Claude seems to think on this question. Page 170, 171, for those with the favorite numbering. Right at the, this is in part 2 of book 3. Right near the end, second to last paragraph. In his own mother, the imprisoned spirit was almost more present to people than her corporal self. He had so often felt it when he sat with her on summer nights like this. Mahaley, too, had one, though the walls of her prison were so thick, and Gladys Farmer. Oh, yes. How much Gladys must have to tell this perfect confidant. The people whose hearts were set high needed such intercourse, whose wish was so beautiful that there was no experiences in this world to satisfy it. And these children of the moon, with their unappeased longings and futile dreams, were a finer race than the children of the sun. This conception flooded the boy's heart like a second moonrise, flowed through him indefinite and strong, while he lay deathly still for fear of losing it. At last, and he goes on, he agreed for the most part it was better not to think about such things, and when he could, he avoided thinking. Claude, in other words, seems to think, to hope that life could have been different with Gladys. They were both people of the moon. That is, people of the dark, not the accepted kind in the modern world. But it is not to be. And soon thereafter, Claude says that he's worried about, this is on page 184, part 5 in book 3, He wondered how he was going through the years ahead of him unless he could get rid of the sick feeling in his soul. Ouch. Ever have a day like that? And this is where the war comes in. Claude has a sick feeling in his soul. Perhaps the war will relieve it. It doesn't quite pass the say it out loud test, does it? I have a sick feeling in my soul. Hey, war. But of course, it's not war. It's fighting in a just cause. Willingness to die for something beyond yourself. What is going on here? Now this really starts back in the beginning of part 2, where Claude is making decisions about marriage to Enid. World War I breaks out at the beginning of part 2. And the people of Nebraska sit on the edge of their seats while the German army is rolling up the French army, as it is wont to do. As you trace the happenings of the war reaches a kind of apogee when the marriage to Enid falls apart. That is, Claude will volunteer soon after Enid abandons him for China and her sister. Now I just want you to consider the name of book 3, where Claude decides to engage the army, that is, to join the army. It is called Sunrise on the Prairie. What an odd title. America is slipping into war. Claude, spoiler alert, might meet his end in that war. Not saying. And it is called a sunrise. This is a sign of how disenchanted the world is for Claude. War magnifies hope. Once again, say that out loud. The war is a hopeful event, a step up from the existence he has now, a sunrise. Why? How could anyone possibly think war, and not just any war, but World War I, trench warfare, no man's land, barbed wire, mustard gas, machine guns, could be just what I'm looking for. Page 208. This is also in book 3. It's in part 11. And this is after Claude returns from basic training. As he walked on alone, Claude was thinking how this country that had once seemed little and dull to him now seemed large and rich in variety. During the months in camp, he had been wholly absorbed in new work and new friendships. And now his own neighborhood came to him with a freshness of things that had been forgotten for a long while, came together before his eyes as a harmonious whole. He was going away. And he would carry the whole countryside in his mind, meaning more to him than it ever had before. There was Lovely Creek, gurgling down there, where he and Ernest used to sit and lament that the book of history was finished, that the world had come to avaricious old age and noble enterprise was dead forever. He was going away. So what does the war mean? Why is the war a kind of hopeful enterprise for Claude? Well, here's the answer. It seems to be a chance to refight the old fights, to refound what has become old and stale. What Claude wants to do is reopen the book of history and show that there is still chaos in the souls of men. That the book of history is not finished. We have many more chapters to write. There are great deeds to be done. And he's the man to do it. And we see this attitude in Claude really throughout. I think the best way of looking at it is to do a comparative analysis in Claude of the times he thinks about the picture of, or the statue of Kit Carson. The Kit Carson statue, which sits apparently on the grounds of the Denver Capitol building. Claude goes to Denver and he looks at the Kit Carson statue. This is page 100. Who's Kit Carson? Western explorer, kind of fought some Indian issue, had some Indian issues that he took care of. A great man of the West. Claude sits there, and this is at the beginning of book, right before he starts wooing Enid. He looks at the Kit Carson horseback. This is book 2, part 1, third to last paragraph. The statue of Kit Carson on horseback, down in the square, pointed westward. But there was no west in that sense anymore. There was still South America. Perhaps he could find something below the isthmus. Here, the sky was like a lid shut down over the world. His mother could see saints and martyrs behind it. Well, in time he got over all this, he supposed. Even his father had been restless as a young man and so on. So, he looks at Kit Carson and said, there is no West. There is no more history to be made. There is no more room for great actions. Perhaps in South America he could go. Perhaps martyrs exist beyond the sky, but the world as it appears to him has a lid on it, which means there's no more possibility for rising. And later on, when thinking about the war, he returns to thoughts about Kit Carson. Page 188. This is after he's decided to become a soldier. Or excuse me, as he's decided to become a soldier. This is right near the end of part 6. When Ernest left, Claude walked as far as a Yenor place with him and came back across the snow-drifted fields under the frosty brilliance of the winter stars. As he looked up at them, he felt more than ever that they must have something to do with the fate of nations and with the incomprehensible things that were happening in this world. In the ordered universe, there must be some mind that read the riddle of this one unhappy planet, that knew what was forming in the dark eclipse of this hour. A question hung in the air, all over this quiet land about him, over his mother even. He was afraid for his country, as he had been and that night on the State House steps in Denver, when this war was undreamt of, hidden in the womb of time. But what is his fear for his country? That there is no more possibility for great action. The war makes possibility for great action. At least that's what he thinks. Now I know many of you sit back and often think, who are the great generals of World War I? What were the great actions of World War I? It doesn't scream out possibilities for human greatness. Right? We think of trench warfare as mass warfare. That is, the great equalizer. But Claude looks at World War I and says, we are still crazy. We aren't routined. We aren't made into creatures of routine, is what I mean by that. We can still do great things. We can still do dangerous things. And he's eager to engage in them. There's a human possibility open that he thought was closed. He might not be able to conquer the West, but he could conquer the Hun. And it's that possibility, that is the possibility that conquering the Hun could fill the hole in his soul, that we will look to next lecture. Okay, we don't have time. How long is your presentation?
As short as you want it.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Have I said something that was confusing, stupid? In your judgment, obviously it wouldn't be stupid as such. Okay, we have here
Hey, my name is Avi Crichton
Avi Crichton.
from the Washington Center. Let's see if I see any people that were you in my